Nine Brides and Granny Hite, Chapter 5, Granny Hite's Glasses, Part 1. The quilters were working on a pattern known as Tangled Garter. This was an involved design, intended for no particular reason, for la vici-vaci, and Granny Hite, besides doing her own corner, wanted to keep close eye on all the rest. But she mislaid her specs. A wild search followed, everyone pitching in and everything being lifted and put down until the house was in a great state. Granny began to wonder if the glasses had been sewn into the quilt, when at tea time they were right in the middle of the cake she had baked. The discovery was made by Zelda Poladsky, a plump and happy mother of 7 who'd come to the Hollow 6 years before. Everybody went into gales at this business of the baked spectacles, except Zelda. She sat very quiet, turning the steel-mounted lenses over and over in her workaday hands. Gently she polished them with her soft underskirt. When she glanced up at Granny, tears were in her eyes. "They are what you saw us with the day we came. Through these bits of glass, into all our hearts you looked." "Stuff and nonsense," scolded Granny. "I think," said Zelda, placing them carefully in Granny's hands, "it is time you tell us everything. Only lately do I understand, and I wish to hear." "Why, this is rubbish," Zelda retorted Granny. "No." Zelda's eyes searched Granny's. "Everybody here while we sew tells something. Now it's your turn. You will do it, please." "All right, Zelda." Granny perceived that Zelda Poladsky had been one of them long enough by now to know the whole tale. And Zelda's lovely daughter Esther and her sister Anna, the widow. But first Granny put the glasses on. How bright and alive were the faces around her. Life had been so long, that she should have so many young friends, the circle always renewing itself. She forgot to inspect the tangled garter, but Zelda was right. Much had begun the day Granny bought these glasses, and a comfort they had been. Granny had stepped to the doorway of Toller's Mountain Store to test the new specs with a glance up the path. And there came the young man in the thick fur cap, though it was April. The old one with his curly wire beard and a shawl tight around his shoulders, the short of breath young mother with baubles at her ears, and the small ones, girls in long wool skirts like little old women, and boys in outlandish pants and harness. Foreigners. "Who are they?" Granny wanted to know. "Poles," grunted Amos Toller. "I can see that without specs, Amos. Anybody can tell they're wanting fattening. That woman's going to have another baby. She needs pine honey and iron. Those children's puny arms and pindly legs. Where are such folks from?" "Grojak, in Poland. They've wrote 3 letters there and sent 2 parcels." Something stirred in Granny Hite. Something disturbing. Foreigners were rare sight in the Hollow, and these were from farther off than the ocean even. Poland. The newcomers mounted to the store porch. It was early, and the whittler's bench was empty. They entered, the youngsters keeping to their ma. She did the bargaining. They'd come for candles, salt, coffee, and a pound of nails. Amos already had a small book on file with their credits and debits. Cash money seldom passed in the mountain store. The young father, whose chin had red stubble with a slash across it like a rope burn or a lash welt, prowled among the factory-made axes, scythes, and trying them for heft and swing in passing hand down their smooth white helves. The woman gazed hungrily at garden seeds in gay envelopes. The young ones, like sober little grandpas and grandmas, huddled and peered silently at the striped candy and ginger pop. Purchases made, the odd family left, the children still at their mother's skirt. Taxed Granny. "Amos Toller, however did they find Cat Track Holler? What brings them here?" "I don't know how they found us, Maddie, but they did. Name's Poladsky. If you ask why they're here, I think it's to get away from something. They footed from Merriamborough with packs on their backs, the young pa pushing his old pa, and the least ones in a wheelbarrow." "Where are they laying head?" "In the Peeler shanty." The Peeler cabin, little more than a 2-room shed, had been falling down ever since the Peelers moved out, California bound, 6 years before. "They've bought the place," enlarged Amos. He shied a misplaced rubber boot to a top shelf and thumped down the cover of the savory coffee bin. I warned them Cass Peeler couldn't make a go of it. She said she and her man were strong. She pulled a gold ring off her hand for down payment. I've wrote the news to Cass. Reckon his wife after all these years would enjoy a ring. He added doubtfully, these oughtn't to be here. The holler doesn't take to outsiders. Granny rapped out the only question that counted. Amos, are they honest? The woman put a brooch up for their first flower and such. I didn't want it, but she liked it best that way. Her man's working part-time over at Coal Mountain. I hear he's right pert with a pick. Yes, Matty, they're honest. Granny went to call on the Pilatskys that very day, though it was a walk for her. She took a jug of dandelion wine, which is powerful for the liver, and a jar of butter. When she saw how many things the Pilatskys lacked, she wished she had also brought pots and pans and bedding. All they had was what they stood in and what they toted on their backs. But the woman had the tumble-down shanty shining, even if it was bare. She used stiff, slow schoolbook English. Her name was Zelda. Color had found her cheeks, and she was real pretty with her white skin, long dark lashes, large eyes, and thick braids wound around her head. Her hands were quick. She used them in talking. The older children weren't in sight, and the younger, who watched Granny without moving, were solemn little people. Don't they ever play? Marveled Granny. Don't they scream and get into mischief? They will. Zelda stroked the heads that pressed her gown. Her hands were rough. She lifted them with comic pain. From breaking land, with mattock. Steppin' is out there now. She nodded towards the fields. What do you eat? Granny's eyes had been busy. She hated pryin', but she had to know. I see taters, but no grits. Grits? Hominy, land of Beulah, don't you know what grits are? We eat borscht, said Zelda. Never heard tell of it. Soup of these. She caught up a handful of leaves. It's very good. Sorrel, leaves, and water? Walls of Jericho. No wonder the young'uns don't skip and prance and hair pull. They need red eaten meat and green salad and milk. Look at those legs. Zelda spread her hands. Soon we shall have the garlics and the cabbages. This land with work, it gives so much. The peasants, already you are so kind. Peasants? Even faggots from the woods you let us take. Faggots? You mean sticks and limbs. Land of Canaan, take whole trees. This country is so big and so friendly, Zelda's eyes shone. As Granny turned to leave, for she had hens to feed, go in the best of health, murmured Zelda earnestly. A new way to say goodbye, decided Granny. In spite of her ankles, she soon called on the Pilatskys again. She brought seeds, beans, squash, turnip, hollyhocks, bachelor buttons, and 4 o'clocks. More to the point, she had Amos Toller's 12-year-old grandson along, lugging pots and bed kivers and a basket of baby ducks. Kyle promptly noticed the 10-year-old Esther and became awkward with girl shock, then excitedly boisterous. Ducks, Mama Zelda clapped her hands. Soon shall be feathers. You might make a patchwork to hold them, said Granny. You've enough old scraps? Oh, yes, Zelda unrolled a treasured bundle of wools and linens, much washed. This was my mother's waist. This was my Yawiga's apron. This, her voice went flat, was my little David's jacket and cap. They're torn, observed Granny. It's a caution how clothes fall apart these days. They're too good to be ripped for crazy quilts. The goods just need bringing to with a thread and needle. Yes, said Zelda tonelessly, re-rolling the stuff. A voice began to holler and back of the nose sing-song. It was the grandfather. He sat before the hearth, snugged in his shawl. His hands over the blaze were long and fine. He was a goldsmith, remarked Zelda. He thinks now of his shop. Such a place it was. The caterwaul continued. The scrunched figure rocked on his stump stool. It reminded Granny of the yearly sawdusty meetings in the Hemlock Tabernacle, with Elder Martin lining out hymns and sermons, and everybody groaning and twitching and leaping at nibble and gnaw of awful sin, and making tracts and hallelujahs for the mourner's bench. She brought up the main purpose of her visit. You must feel free to join us in church. We're new lights here mostly, but hard shells are welcome. Zelda Pilatsky went bolt still, then eased and laughed. She patted Granny's hand. But here in our little house we hold our Sabbath. our prayers. The good grandpa leads us. The shawled form rocked and wailed. All the sorrow of the world was in that sing-song, the like of which Granny had never heard before. A thought froze her to the marrow. "You're not Episcopals, are you?" Zelda blinked. Worse dismay struck Granny Hite. "You're not Popish?" There had never been a Popish worshipper in Cat-Track Hollow. "But these folks being foreigners, we have our own church," stated Zelda simply. Her eyes steady, wary. So it was something outlandish, perceived Granny. She decided to leave the matter to Brother Martin when the circuit riding man should appear. "Whatever you are, you'll get over it," she promised cheerily. "We have wonderful camp meetings each May. No heathen can stand up to them." "We had pogroms each May," stated Zelda. Pogroms? Granny wondered if those were some kind of early fruit. Maybe little pomegranates ripening in the spring like tart pie cherries. Might be that Zelda had brought some seeds of them with her from Grojak. If so, Zelda didn't offer any and swapped to Granny's garden sass and flower seeds. Not that Granny expected payment. An altogether different notion struck her. A splendid idea. "I'm going to tell Grandsir Beckett to come over here and fotch your old un and take him fishing. Hunting, too. What he needs is a day off with the menfolk and a good drench of cider. Get him out of that shawl. Grandsir is awful old, but he's mighty spry. Some night soon your grunting old grandpa will be out after a fat possum, follering the hounds and baying with the best of them. You must cook possum slow with sweet potatoes." "Possum? What is possum?" "Land of Dan, you are furrin'," cried Granny.